Greetings, everyone. Um, shoot, trying to rig my shit. I gotta come up with a better. Oh, perfect. I gotta come up with a better way to rig my phone. Okay. Greetings, everyone. As promised, I am going to continue. First of all, my name is Cassandra Floyd, also known as the Daughter of the Fates, founder of the Temple of Evolutionary Emergence. I am back today with the continued reading of the Parable of the Sower by Octavia Butler. All right. I did a short read yesterday, so I'm going to pick up where we left off. If you're watching from anything other than YouTube, I would ask and encourage you to go to my YouTube channel to watch this live, for my analytics, what I'm saying, for my watch hours and the likes and the shares and the subscriptions and all of that stuff. I would also ask that you become a subscriber or actually a member of my YouTube channel. You can do that. There's different membership variances, membership variances, if you will. So you can check that out. I was actually surprised because I haven't really been paying that much attention to that type of that aspect of the analytics since I became monetized, because I haven't been monetized very long. And I actually went through the other day to check out the analytics for my channel, and I was surprised because a lot of y'all follow me pretty regularly, pretty religiously, if you will. And I was surprised to see that I only had one member. I only had one, you have your subscription, anybody can subscribe, but in terms of people who pay for a membership, I was like, man, I only have one member. That's interesting. And maybe it's because I'm new to the monetization process, and so I haven't really been pitching that as much. But become a member. The memberships are inexpensive. I don't remember what the variances are, but crazy inexpensive. I think one is $3.99 a month. One is $5.99 a month or something like that. Become a member of the Daughter of the Fates channel. In the meantime, share, subscribe. Please forward my stuff to others. If it is impactful for you, it will be impactful for someone else. Share the information, okay? So that's really all I'm going to say about that. I want to try to get a more substantial read in today because my ambition is still to finish this book tomorrow, and that is going to be an ambitious feat, okay? So today we're picking up on page 238 of the Parable of the Sower by Octavia Butler. They all stared at us. As we went past, people stopped their gardening, outdoor cooking, or whatever to stare at us. We had pushed ourselves, had been eager to arrive ahead of the crowd. I believe we will soon come in from the Bay Area. So we didn't arrive with the usual human river. Yet by ourselves, we are enough of a crowd to make the local squatters nervous. They let us alone, though. Except during disaster-induced feeding frenzies like the ones after the earthquake, most people let one another alone. I think Dominic and Justin are making it easier for us to fit in. Justin, now tethered to Allie's wrist, runs around staring at the squatters until they make him nervous. Then he runs back to Allie and demands to be carried. He's a cute little kid, lean, grim-faced people tend to smile at him. No one shot at us or challenged us as we walked along the highway. No one bothered us later when we left the highway and headed into the trees towards what we thought might be a good area. We found old campsites and toilet places and avoided them. We didn't want to be within the side of the highway or anyone else's tent or shack. We wanted privacy, not too many rocks to sleep on, and a way of reaching the water that didn't put us too much on display. We looked for over an hour until we found an isolated old campsite, long abandoned and a little higher upslope than others we'd seen. It suited all of us. Then, with hours of daylight left, we rested in enormous comfort and laziness, knowing we had the rest of the day and all of tomorrow to do almost nothing. Natividad fed Dominique, and the two of them drifted off to sleep. Allie followed her example with Justin, although preparing him a meal was a little more complicated. Both women had more reason to be tired and to need sleep than the rest of us, so we left them out, and when we drew lots for a watch schedule, one for day and one at night. We shouldn't get too comfortable. Also, we agreed that no one should go off exploring or getting water alone. I thought the couples would soon start going off together, and I thought it was I thought it was just about time for Bancole and me to have that talk. I sat with him and cleaned our new handgun while he cleaned the rifle. Harry was on watch and needed my gun. When I went over to give it to him, he let me know he understood exactly what was going on between Bancole and me. Be careful, he whispered. Don't give that poor old guy a heart attack. I'll tell I'll tell him you were worried, I said. Harry laughed, then sobered. Be careful, Lauren. Bancole is probably all right. He seems to be, but well, yell if anything goes wrong. I rested my hand on his shoulder for a moment and said thank you. The nice thing about sitting and working alongside someone you don't know very well, someone you'd like to know much better, is that you can talk with him or be quiet with him. You can get comfortable with him and with the awareness that you'll soon be making love to him. Bancole and I were quiet for a while, a little shy. I sneaked glances at him and caught him sneaking glances at me. Then, to my own surprise, I began to talk to him about Earthseed. Not preaching, just talking. Testing, I guess. I needed to see his reaction. Earthseed is the most important thing in my life. If Bancole were going to laugh at it, I needed to know now. I didn't expect him to agree with it or even to be much interested in it. He's an old man. I thought he was probably content with whatever religion he had. It occurred to me as I spoke that I had no idea what his religion was. I asked him. None at all, he said. When my wife was alive, we went to a Methodist church. Her religion was important to her, so I went along. I saw how it comforted her, and I wanted to believe, but I never could. We were Baptists, I said. I couldn't make myself believe either, and I couldn't tell anyone. My father was the minister. I kept quiet and began to understand Earthseed. Began to invent Earthseed, he said. Began to discover it and understand it, I said. Stumbling across the truth isn't the same as making things up. I wondered how many times and ways I would have to say this to new people. It sounds like some combination of Buddhism, existentialism, Sufism, and I don't know what else, he said. Buddhism doesn't make a god of the concept of change, but the impertinence of everything is a basic Buddhist principle. I know, I said. I've done a lot of reading. Some other religions and philosophies do contain ideas that would fit into Earthseed, but none of them are Earthseed. They go off in their own directions. He nodded. All right, but tell me, what do people have to do to become members of an Earthseed community? A nice door opening question. The essentials, I answered. Are to learn to shape God with forethought, care, and work, to educate and benefit their communities, their families, and themselves, and to contribute to the fulfillment of the destiny. And why should people bother about the destiny, far-fetched as it is? What's in it for them? A unifying, purposeful life here on earth, and the hope of heaven for themselves and their children. A real heaven, not mythology or philosophy. A heaven that will be theirs to shape. Or a hell, he said. His mouth twitched. Human beings are good at creating hells for themselves, even out of richness. He thought for a moment. It sounds too simple, you know. You think it's simple? I asked in surprise. I said it sounds too simple. It sounds overwhelming to some. I mean, it's it's too straightforward. If you get people to accept it, they'll make it more complicated, more open to interpretation, more mythical, and more comforting. Not around me they won't, I said. With you or without you, they will. All religions change. Think about the big ones. What do you think Christ would be what do you think Christ would do? Excuse me. What do you think Christ would be these days? A Baptist, a Methodist, a Catholic, and the Buddha. Do you think he'd be a Buddhist now? What kind of Buddhism would he practice? He smiled. After all, if God is change, surely Earthseed can change, and if it lasts, it will. I looked away from him because he was smiling. This was all nothing to him. I know, I said, no one can stop change, but we all shape change whether we mean to or not. I mean, to guide and shape Earthseed into what it should be. Perhaps, he went on smiling. How serious are you? How serious are you about this? The question drove me deep into myself. I spoke, almost not knowing what I would say. When my father disappeared, I began. When my father disappeared, I began. It was Earthseed that kept me going. When most of my community and the rest of my family were wiped out, I was alone, I still had Earthseed. What I am now, all that I am now is Earthseed. What are you now? He said after a long silence. Uh, Excuse me, sorry about that. What you are now, he said after a long silence, is a very unusual young woman. We didn't talk for a while after that. I wondered what he thought. He hadn't seemed to be bottling up too much hilarity, no more than I'd expected. Um, he had been willing to go along with his wife's religious needs. Now he would at least permit me mine. I wondered about his wife. He hadn't mentioned her before. What had she been like? How had she died? Did you leave home because your wife died? I asked. He put down a long, slender cleaning rod and rested his back against the tree behind him. My wife died 5 years ago, he said. 3 men broke in, junkies, dealers, I don't know. They beat her, tried to make her tell where the drugs were. Drugs? They had decided that we must have something they could use or sell. They didn't like the things she was able to give them, so they kept beating her. She had a heart problem. He drew in a long breath, then sighed. She was still alive when I got home. She was able to tell me what had happened. I tried to help her, but the bastards had taken her medicine, taken everything. I phoned for an ambulance. After it arrived an hour after she had died. I tried to save her, then to revive her. I tried so damn hard. I stared down the hill from our camp, where just a glint of water was visible in the distance through the trees and bushes. The world is full of painful stories. Sometimes it seems as though there aren't any other kind, and yet I find myself thinking how beautiful that glint of water was through the trees. I should have headed north when Sharon died, Bankole said. I thought about it. But you stayed? I turned away from the water and looked at him again. Why? He shook his head. I didn't know what to do. So for some time, I didn't do anything. Friends took care of me, cooked for me, cleaned the house. It surprised me that they would do that. Church people, most of them, neighbors, more her friends than mine. I thought of Wardle Parish, devastated after the loss of his sister and her children and his house. Had Bankole been some communities Wardle Parish? Did you live in a walled community? I asked. Yes. Not rich, though. Nowhere near rich. People managed to hold on to their property and feed their families. Not much else. No servants, no hired guards. Sounds like my old neighborhood. I suppose it sounds a lot. I suppose it sounds like a lot of old neighborhoods that aren't there anymore. I stayed to help the people who had helped me. I couldn't walk away from them. But you did. You left. Why? Fire and scavengers. You too? Your whole community? Yes. The houses burned. Most of the people were killed. The rest scattered. We went to family or friends elsewhere. Uh, the rest scattered, went to family or friends elsewhere. Scavengers and squatters moved in. I didn't decide to leave. I escaped. Much too familiar. Where did you live? What city? San Diego. That far south? Yes. As I said, I should have left years ago. If I had, I could have managed plane fare and resettlement money. Plane plane fare and resettlement money? He might not call that rich, but we would have. Where are you going now? I asked. North, he shrugged. Just anywhere north, somewhere in no just anywhere north or somewhere in particular. Just anywhere north or somewhere in particular. Anywhere I can anywhere I can be paid for my services and allowed to live among people who aren't out to kill me for my food and water. Or for drugs, I thought. I looked into his bearded face and added up the hints I'd picked up today and over the past few days. You're a doctor, aren't you? He looked a little surprised. I was, yes. Family practice. It seems a long time ago. People will always need doctors, I said. You'll do all right. My mother used to say that. He gave me a wry smile. But here I am. I smiled back because, looking at him now, I couldn't help myself. But as he spoke, I decided he had told me at least one lie. He might as well, he might as well, oh shit. He might be as displaced in distress as he appeared to be. But he wasn't just wandering north. He wasn't looking for just anywhere he could be paid for his services and not be robbed or murdered. He wasn't the kind of man who wandered. He knew where he was going. He had a haven somewhere, a relative's home, another home of his own, a friend's home, something, some definite destination. Or perhaps he just had enough money to buy a place for himself in Washington or Canada or Alaska. He had had to choose between fast, safe, expensive air travel and having settling in money when he got where he was going. He had chosen settling in money. If so, I agreed with him. He was taking the kind of risk that would enable him to make a new beginning as soon as possible if he survived. On the other hand, if I were right about any of this, he might disappear. He might disappear on me some night. Or perhaps he would be more open about it. Just walk away from me someday, turn down a side road and wave goodbye. I didn't want that. After I'd slept with him, I would want it even less. Even now, I wanted to keep him with me. I hated that he was lying to me already, or I believed he was. But why should he tell me everything? He didn't know me very well yet, and like me, he meant to survive. Perhaps I could convince him that he and I could survive well together. Meanwhile, best to enjoy him without quite trusting him. I may be wrong about all of this, but I don't believe that I am. Pity, excuse me. We finished the guns, loaded them, and went down to the water to wash. You could go right down to the water, scoop some up in a pot, and take it away. It was free. I kept looking around, thinking someone would come to stop us or charge us or something. I suppose we could have been robbed, but no one paid any attention to us. We saw other people getting water in bottles, canteens, pots, and bags, but the place seemed peaceful. No one bothered anyone. No one paid any attention to us. A place like this can't last, I told Bankole. It's a shame. Life could be good here. I suspect that it's against the law to live here, he said. This is a state recreation area. There should be some kind of limit on how long you can stay. I'm certain that there should be, used to be, some group policing. I'm certain that there should be, used to be, some group policing the place. I wonder if officials of some kind come around to collect bribes now and then. Not while we're here, I hope. I dried my hands and arms and waited for him to dry his. Are you hungry? I asked. Oh, yes, he said. He looked at me for a while, then reached for me. He took both my arms, drew me to him, kissed me, and spoke into my ear. Aren't you? I didn't say anything. After a while, I took his hand and we went back to camp to pick up one of the one of his blankets. Then we went to an isolated little spot that we'd both noticed earlier. It felt natural and easy to lie down with him and to explore the smooth, hard, broad feel of his body. He'd kept himself fit. No doubt walking hundreds of miles in the past few weeks had burned off whatever fat he'd been carrying. He was still big, barrel-chested and tall. Best of all, he took a lot of uncomplicated Best of all, he took a lot of uncomplicated pleasure in my body, and I got to share it with him. It isn't often that I can enjoy the good side of my hyper empathy. I let the sensation take over, intense and wild. I might be more in danger of having a heart attack than he is. How had I done without this for so long? There was an odd, unromantic moment when we both reached into crumpled clothing and produced condoms. It was funny because of the way it hit us both at once, and we laughed. Then went on to the serious business of loving and pleasuring one another. That combed and trimmed beard that he's so vain about tickles like mad. I knew I should have let you alone. I knew I should have let you alone, he said to me when we had made love twice and were still not willing to get up and go back to the others. You're going to kill me. I'm too old for all of this stuff. I laughed and made a pillow of his shoulder. After a while, he said, I need to be serious for a minute, girl. Okay. He drew a long breath, sighed, swallowed, hesitated. I don't want to give you up, he said. I smiled. You're a kid, he said. I ought to know better. How old are you anyway? I told him. He jumped, then pushed me off his shoulder. 18? He flinched away from me as though my skin had burned him. My God, he said, you're a baby. I'm a child molester. I didn't laugh, though I wanted to. I just looked at him. After a while, he frowned and shook his head. In a little more time, he moved back against me, touching my face, my shoulders, my breast. You're not just 18, he said. I shrugged. When were you born? What year? 2009. No. He drew the word out. No. I kissed him and said in the same tone, yes. Now stop your nonsense. You want to be with me and I want to be with you. We're not going to split up because of my age, are we? After a while, he shook his head. You should have a nice youngster like Travis, he said. I should have the sense and the strength to send you off to find one. That made me think of Curtis, and I cringed away from thinking of him. I've thought as little as possible about Curtis Talcott. He isn't like my brothers. He may be dead, but none of us ever saw his body. I saw his brother Michael. I was terrified of seeing Curtis himself, but I never did. He may not be dead. He's lost to me, but I hope he's not dead. He should be here with me on the road. I hope he's alive and all right. Who have I reminded you of? Bankole asked me, his voice soft and deep. I shook my head. A boy I knew at home. We were going to get married this year. I don't even know whether he's still alive. You loved him? Yes. We were going to marry and leave home, walk north. We had decided we had decided to go this fall. That's crazy. You intended to walk this road even though you didn't have to? Yes. And if we had left earlier, he'd be with me. I wish I knew he was all right. He lay down on his back and drew me down beside him. We've all lost someone, he said. You and I seem to have lost everyone. That's a bond, I suppose. A terrible one, I said, but not our only one. He shook his head. You're really 18? Yes, as of last month. You look and act years older. This is who I am, I said. You were the oldest kid in your family, weren't you? I nodded. I had 4 brothers. They are all dead. Yes, he sighed. Yes. Tuesday, August 31st, 2027. I spent all of today talking, writing, reading, and making love to Bankole. It seems such a luxury not to have to get up, pack, and walk all day. We all laid sprawled around the campsite, resting aching muscles, eating, and doing nothing. More people flowed into the area from the highway and made their camps, but none of them bothered us. I began Zara's reading lesson, and Jill and Allie looked interested. I included them as though I had intended to from the first. It turned out that they could read a little but hadn't learned to write. Toward the end of the lesson, I read a few Earthseed verses to them in spite of Harry's groans. Yet Allie proclaimed that she would never pray to any god of change. Harry was the one who corrected her. Zara and Travis both smiled at that, and Bankole watched us all with apparent interest. After that, Allie began to ask questions instead of making scornful proclamations, and for the most part, the others answered her. Travis and Natividad, Harry and Zara. Once Bankole answered, expanding on something I had told him yesterday. Then he caught himself and looked a little embarrassed. I still think it's too simple, he said to me. A lot of it is logical, but it will never work without a sprinkling of mystical confusion. Oh, fucking shit. Child, goddamn. Oh my God. I'll leave that to my descendants, I said, and he busied himself, digging a bag of almonds out of his pack, pouring some into his hand and passing the rest around. Just before nightfall, a gun battle began over toward the highway. We couldn't see any of it from where we were, but we stopped talking and lay down. With bullets flying, it seemed best to keep low. The shooting started and stopped, moved away, then came back. I was on watch, so I had to stay alert. But in this storm of noise, nothing moved near us except the trees in the evening breeze. It looked so peaceful, and yet people out there were trying to kill each other, and no doubt succeeding. Strange how normal it's become for us to lie on the ground and listen while nearby people try to kill each other. Chapter 22. As wind, as water, as fire, as life, God is both creative and destructive, demanding and yielding, sculptor and clay. God is infinite potential. God is change. Thursday, September 9th, 2027. We've had over a week of weary, frightening, nerve-wracking walking. We've reached and passed through the city of Sacramento without real trouble. We've been able to buy enough food and water, been able to find plenty of empty spaces in the hills where we could make camp. Yet none of us have had any feelings of comfort or well-being along the stretches of I-5 that we've just traveled. I-5 is much less traveled than US 101 in spite of the earthquake chaos. There were times when the only people we could see were each other. Those times never lasted long, but they did happen. On the other hand, there were more trucks on I-5. We had to be careful because trucks traveled during the day as well as at night. Also, there were more human bones on I-5. It was nothing It was nothing to run across skulls, lower jaws, or bones of the pelvis or torso. Arm and leg bones were rarer. Arm and leg bones were rarer, but now and then we spotted them too. I think it's the trucks, Bankole told us. If they hit someone along here, they wouldn't stop. They wouldn't dare. And the junkies and alcoholics wouldn't be that careful where they walked. I suppose he's right, although along that whole empty stretch of road, we saw only 4 people whom I believed were either sober or not sane. But we saw other things. On Tuesday, we camped in a little hollow back in the hills to the west of the road. A big black and white dog came wandering down toward our camp with the fresh looking bloody hand and forearm of a child in his mouth. The dog spotted us and froze, turned, and ran back the way it had come. But we all got a good look before it went, and we all saw the thing. That night, we posted a double watch, 2 watchers, 2 guns, no unnecessary conversation, and no sex. The next day, we decided not to take another rest day until we had passed through Sacramento. There was no guarantee that anything would be better on the other side of Sacramento, but we wanted to get away from this grim land. That night, looking for a place to camp, we stumbled across 4 ragged, filthy kids huddled around a campfire. The picture of them is still clear in my mind. Kids the age of my brothers, 12, 13, maybe 14 years old, 3 boys and a girl. The girl was pregnant and so huge it was obvious she would be giving birth any day. We rounded a bend in a dry stream bed, and there these kids were, roasting a severed human leg, maneuvering it where it lay in the middle of the fire atop a burning wood by twisting its foot. As we watched, the girl pulled a sliver of charred flesh from the thigh and stuffed it into her mouth. They never saw us. I was in the lead, and I stopped the others before they rounded the bend. Harry and Zara, who were just behind me, saw all that I saw. We turned the others back and away, not telling them why until we were far from those kids and their cannibal feast. No one attacked us. No one bothered us at all. The country we walked through was even more beautiful in some places. Green trees and rolling hills, golden dried grasses and tiny communities. Farms, many overgrown and abandoned houses. Nice country, and compared to Southern California, rich country. More water, more food, more room. So why were there people eating one another? There were several burned out buildings. It was obvious that there had been trouble here too, but much less than the one on the coast. Yet we couldn't wait to get back to the coast. Sacramento was all right to resupply in and hurry through. Water and food were cheap there compared to what you could buy along the roadside, of course. Cities were always a relief as far as prices went, but cities were also dangerous. More gangs, more cops, more suspicious, nervous people with guns. You tiptoe through cities. You keep up a steady pace. You keep your eyes open and try to look both too intimidating to bother and invisible. Neat trick. Bankole says cities have been like that for a long time. Speaking of Bankole, I haven't let him get much rest on this day. He doesn't seem to mind. He did say something that I should make note of, though. He said he wanted me to leave the group with him. He has, as I suspected, a safe haven, or as safe as any haven can be, that isn't surrounded by high-tech security devices and armed guards. It's in the hills on the coast near Cape Mendocino, maybe 2 weeks from here. My sister and her family have been living there, he said, but the property belongs to me. There's room on it for you. I could imagine how delighted his sister would be to see me. Would she try to be polite, or would she stare at me, then him, then demand to know whether he was in his right mind? Did you hear what I said? He demanded. I looked at him, interested in the anger I heard in his voice. Why anger? What I am do what what am I doing? Boring you? He demanded. I took his hand and kissed it. You introduced me to your sister and she'll measure you for a straitjacket. After a while, he laughed. Yes, and then I don't care. Um, you might sooner or later. You'll come with me. You'll come with me then? No. I'd like to, but no. He smiled. Yes, you'll come. I watched him. I tried to read the smile, but it's hard to read a bearded face. It's easier to say it's easier to say what I didn't see or didn't recognize. I didn't see condescension or that particular kind of disregard that some men reserve for women. He wasn't deciding that my no was a secret yes. Something else was going on. I own 300 acres. Holy shit. I own 300 acres, he said. I bought the property years ago as an investment. There was going to be a big housing development up there, and speculators like me were going to make tons of money selling our land to developers. The project fell through for some reason, and I was stuck with land that I could either sell or keep at a loss. Oh wait, that I could either sell at a loss or keep. I kept it. Most of it is good for farming. It's got some trees on it and some big tree stumps. My sister and her husband have built a house and a few outbuildings. You might have dozens or hundreds of squatters on that land now, I said. I don't think so. Access is a problem. It's not convenient to any real road, and it's well away from big highways. It's a great place to hide. Water. There are wells. My sister says the area is getting drier, warmer. That's no surprise, but the groundwater seems dependable so far. I thought I could see where he was headed now, but he was going to have I thought I could see where he was headed now, but he was going to have to get there all by himself, his land, his choice. There aren't many black people up that way, are there? I asked. Not many, he agreed. My sister hasn't had much trouble though. What does she do for a living? Farm the land? Yes, and her husband does odd jobs for cash, which is dangerous because it leaves her and the children alone for days, weeks, sometimes even months at a time. If we can manage to support ourselves without becoming a drain on her few resources, we might be useful to her. We might give her more security. How many kids? 3. Let's see, 11, 13, and 15 years old by now. She's only 40 herself. His mouth twitched. Only, yeah, even a little sister was old enough to be my mother. Her name's Alexandria, married to Don Casey. They both hate cities. They thought my land was a godsend. They could raise children who might live to grow up. He nodded, and their children have done all right. How have you kept in touch? I asked. Phone? That was part of our agreement, he said. They don't have a phone. But when Don goes to one of the towns to get work, he phones me and lets me know how everyone is. He won't know what's happened to me. He won't be expecting me. If he's tried to phone, both he and Alex will be worried. You should have flown up, I said, but I'm glad you didn't. Are you? So am I. Listen, you're coming with me. I can't think of anything I want as much as I want you. I haven't wanted anything at all for a long time. Too long. He leaned back against the tree. Our campsite wasn't as completely private as the one in San Luis, had been, but there were trees, and the couples could get away from each other. Each couple had one gun, and the Gilchrist sisters were babysitting Dominique as well as Justin. We had put them in the middle of a rough triangle and given them my gun. On I-5, they and Travis had a chance to do a little target practice. It was all it was all of our duty to look around now and then and make sure no strangers wandered into the area. I looked around. Sitting up, I could see Justin running around chasing pigeons. Jill was keeping an eye on him, but not trying to keep up with him. Bankole took me by the shoulders and turned me to face him. I'm not boring you, am I? He asked for the second time. I had been trying not to look at him. I looked now, but he had not yet said what he had said. He had not yet said what he had to say if he wanted to keep me with him. Did you know? Let's see. Oh, excuse me. Did he know? I'm telling y'all, my eyes are getting so bad. I'm going to have to do something about this. Did he know? I thought he did. I want to go with you, I said, but I'm serious about Earthseed. I couldn't be more serious. You have to understand that. Why did this sound strange to me? It was the absolute truth, but I felt odd telling it. I know my rival, he said. Maybe that's why it sounded strange. I was telling him there was someone else, something else. Maybe it would have sounded less strange if the something else were another man. You could help me, I said. Help you what? Do you have any real idea what you want to do? Begin the first Earthseed community, he sighed. You could help me, I repeated. This world is falling apart. You could help me begin something purposeful and constructive. Going to fix the world, are you? He said with quite amusement. I looked at him. For a moment, I was too angry to let myself speak. When I could control my voice, I said, It's all right if you don't believe, but don't laugh. Do you know what it means to have something to believe in? Don't laugh. After a while, he said, All right. After a longer while, I said, Fixing the world is not what Earthseed is about. The stars, I know. He lay flat on his back and turned his head to look at me instead of looking up. This world would be a better place if people lived according to Earthseed, I said. But then this world would be a better place if people lived according to the teachings of almost any religion. That's true. Why do you think they'll live according to the teaching of yours? A few will. Several thousand, several 100,000, millions. I don't know. But when I have a home base, I'll begin the first community. In fact, I've already begun it. Is that what you need? Is that what you need me for? He didn't bother to smile or pretend it was a joke. It wasn't. I moved over closer to him and sat next to him so that I could look down into his face. I need you to understand me, I said. I need you to take me the way I am or go off to your land by yourself. Shall listen. Oh my God. You need me to take you and all your friends off the street so you can start a church. Again, he was altogether serious. That or nothing, I said with equal seriousness. He gave me a humorless smile. So now we know where we stand. I smoothed his beard and saw that he wanted to move away from my hand, but that he did not move. Are you all that sure you want God as your rival? I asked. I don't seem to have much choice, do I? He covered my caressing hand with one of his own. Tell me, do you ever lose your temper and scream and cry? Sure. I can't picture it. In all honesty, I can't. And that reminded me of something I hadn't told him. Had better tell him before he found out and felt cheated or decided that I didn't trust him, which I still didn't quite. But I didn't want to lose him to stupidity or cowardice. I didn't want to lose him at all. Still want me with you? I asked. Oh, yes, he said. I intend to marry you once we've settled. Wow. He had managed to surprise me. I stared at him with my mouth open. A genuine spur of the moment reaction, he said. I'll have to remember it. Will you marry me, by the way? Listen to me first. No more. Bring your church, bring your congregation. I doubt they care any more about the stars than I do, but bring them. I like them, and there's room for them. If they would come, my next effort would be to convince them, but this effort wasn't over yet. That isn't all, I said. Let me tell you one more thing. Then, if you still want me, I'll marry you any time you say, I want to. You must know I want to. He waited. My mother was abusing a prescription drug when she got pregnant with me. The drug was Paracecto. As a result, I have hyperempathy syndrome. He took that in with no sign of how he felt about it. He sat up and looked at me with great curiosity, as though he hoped to see some sign of my hyperempathy on my face or body. You feel other people's pain? He asked. I share other people's pain and pleasure, I said. There hasn't been much pleasure to share lately except with you. Do you share bleeding? No more. I did when I was little. But you, I saw you kill a man. Yes. I shook my head, remembering what he had seen. I had to, or he would have killed me. I know that. It's just that I'm surprised you were able to do it. I told you I had to. He shook his head. I've read about the syndrome, of course, although I'd never seen a case. I remember thinking that it might not be so bad a thing if most people had to endure all the pain they caused. Not doctors or other medical people, of course, but most people. Bad idea, I said. I'm not sure. Take my word for it. Bad idea. Self-defense shouldn't have to be an agony or a killing or both. I can be crippled by the pain of a wounded person. I'm a very good shot because I've never felt that I could afford to just wound someone. Also, I stopped and looked past him for a moment and drew a deep breath, then focused on him again. The worst of it, if you got hurt, I might not be able to help you. I might be as crippled by your injury, by your pain, as you are. I suspect you'd find a way, he smiled a little. Don't suspect that, Bankole. I stopped and hunted for words that would make him understand. I'm not looking for compliments or even reassurance. I want you to understand. If you broke your leg badly, if you were shot, if anything serious and disabling happened to you, I might be disabled too. You must know how disabling real pain can be. Yes, I know a little about you too. No, don't tell me again that you aren't fishing for compliments. I know. Let's get back to camp. I've got some pain medications in my bag. I'll teach you how and when to use them. I'll teach you how and when to use them on me or whoever needs them. If you can just hold on and be yourself long enough to use them, you can do whatever else may be necessary. Okay, so do you still want to marry me? It surprised me how much I didn't want to ask that question. I knew he still wanted me, yet there I was asking him, almost begging him to say it. I needed to hear it. He laughed, big, full laughter that sounded so real I couldn't take offense. I'll have to remember this, he said. Do you imagine for 1 minute, girl, that I would let you get away? Chapter 23. Your teachers are all around you. All that you perceive, all that you experience, all that is given to you or taken from you, all that you love or hate, need or fear will teach you. If you will learn, God will teach you if you will learn. God is your first and your last teacher. God is your hardest teacher, subtle, demanding. Learn or die. Friday, September 10th. We had another battle to try to sleep through before dawn this morning. It began to the south of us, out on the out on or near the highway, and worked its way. Oh shit! It's 2 o'clock. Okay, all right. It worked its way first towards, then away from us. We could hear people shooting, screaming, cursing, running. Same old stuff. Tiresome, dangerous, and stupid. The shooting went on for over an hour, waxing and waning. There was a final barrage that seemed to involve more guns than ever. Then the noise stopped. I managed to sleep through some of it. I got over being afraid, even got over being angry. In the end, I was only tired. I thought, if the bastards are going to kill me, I can't stop them by staying awake. If that wasn't altogether true, I didn't care. I slept. And somehow, during or after the battle, in spite of the watch, 2 people slipped into our camp and bedded down among us. They slept too. We awoke early as usual so that we could start walking while the heat wasn't too terrible. We've learned to wake up without prompting at the first light of dawn. Today, 4 of us sat up in our bags at almost the same time. I was crawling out of my bag to go off and urinate when I spotted the extra people. 2 gray lumps in the dawn light, one large and one small, laying against each other, asleep on the bare ground. Thin arms and legs extended like sticks from rags and mounds of clothing. I glanced around at the others and saw that they were staring where I was staring, all of them except Jill, who was supposed to be on watch. We began trusting her to stand night watch last week with a partner. This was only her second solitary watch. And where was she looking? Away into the trees. So she and I would have to talk. Harry and Travis were already reacting to the figures on the ground. In silence, each man was peeling out of his bag in his underwear and standing up. More fully clothed, I matched them, move for move, and the 3 of us closed in around the 2 intruders. The larger of the 2 awoke all at once, jumped up, darted 2 or 3 steps toward Harry, then stopped. It was a woman. We could see her better now. She was brown-skinned with a lot of long, straight, unkempt hair. Her coloring was as dark as mine, but she was all planes and angles, a wiry hawk-faced woman who could have used a few decent meals and a good scrubbing. She looked like a lot of people we've seen on the road. The second intruder awoke, saw Travis standing nearby in his underwear, and screamed. That got everyone's attention. It was the high, piercing shriek of a child, a little girl who looked about 7. She was a tiny, pinched image of a woman, her mother, or her sister, perhaps. The woman ran back to the child and tried to scoop her up, but the child had folded herself into a tight fetal knot, and the woman, trying to lift her, could not get a grip. She stumbled, fell over, and in an instant she too had rolled herself into a tight ball. By then, everyone had come to see. Harry, I said, and waited until he looked at me. Would you and Zara keep watch, make sure nothing else surprises us? He nodded. He and Zara, detached from the cluster, separated and took up positions on opposite sides of the camp. Harry nearest to the approach from the highway, and Zara on the approach from the nearest lesser road. We had buried ourselves as well as we could in a deserted area that Bankole said must once have been a park, but we didn't kid ourselves that we were alone. We'd followed I-5 to a small city outside Sacramento, away from the worst of the sprawl, but there were still plenty of poor people around, local paupers and refugees like us. Where had this pair of raggedy, terrified, filthy people come from? We won't hurt you, I said to them as they lay, still rolled up on the ground. Get up. Come on, get up. You've come into our camp unasked. You can at least talk to us. We didn't touch them. Bankole seemed to want to, but he stopped when I grasped his arm. They were already scared to death. A strange man reaching out to them might make them hysterical. Trembling, the woman unrolled herself and gazed up at us. Now I realized she looked Asian except for the coloring. She put her head down and whispered something to the child. After a moment, the two of them stood up. We didn't know this was your place, she whispered. We'll go away. Let us go away. I sighed and looked at the terrified face of the little girl. You can go, I said, or if you like, you can eat with us. They both wanted to run away. They were like deer frozen in terror or about to bolt. But I'd said the magic word 2 weeks ago. I wouldn't have said it, but I said it today. I said it today to these two starved-looking people. Eat. Food? The woman asked. Yes, we'll share a little food with you. The woman looked at the little girl. I was certain now that they were mother and daughter. We can't pay, she said. We don't have anything. I could see that. Just take what we give you and nothing more than what we give you, I said. That will be pay enough. We won't steal. We aren't thieves. Of course they were thieves. How else could they live? Some stealing and scavenging, maybe some whoring. They weren't very good at it, or they'd look better. But for the little kids' sake, I wanted to help them at least with a meal. Wait then, I said. We'll put a meal together. They sat where they were and watched us with hungry eyes. There was more hunger in those eyes than I could fill with our food. I thought I'd probably made a mistake. These people were so desperate. They were dangerous. It didn't matter at all that they looked harmless. They were still alive and strong enough to run. They were not harmless. It was Justin who eased some of the tension in those bottomless, hungry eyes. Stark naked, he toddled. The girl only stared back, but after a moment, the woman began to smile. She said something to Justin, and he smiled. Then he ran back to Allie, who held on to him long enough to dress him. But he had done his work. The woman was seeing us with different eyes. She watched Natividad nursing Dominique, then watched Bankole combing his beard. This seemed funny to her and to the child, and they both giggled. You're a hit, I told Bankole. I don't see what's so funny about a man combing his beard, he muttered and put his comb away. I dug sweet pears out of my pack and took one each to the woman and the girl. I had just bought them 2 days before and had only 3 left. Other people got the idea and began sharing what they could spare. Shelled walnuts, apples, and a pomegranate. Valencia oranges, figs, little things. Save what you can, Natividad told the woman as she gave her almonds wrapped in a little piece of red cloth. Wrap things in here and tie the ends together. We all shared cornbread made with a little honey and the hard-boiled eggs we bought and cooked yesterday. We baked the cornbread in the coals of last night's fire so that we could get away early this morning. The woman and the little girl ate as though the plain, cold food were the best they'd ever tasted, as though they couldn't believe someone had given it to them. They crouched over it as though they were afraid we might snatch it back. We've got to go, I said at last. The sun's getting hotter. The woman looked at me, her strange, sharp face hungry again, but now not hungry for food. Let us go with you, she said, her words tumbling over one another. We'll work, we'll get wood, make fire, clean dishes, anything. Take us with you. Bankole looked at me. I assume you saw that coming. I nodded. The woman was looking from one of us to the other. Anything, she whispered or whimpered. Her eyes were dry and starved, but tears streamed from the little girl's eyes. Give us a moment to decide, I said. I meant Go away so my friends can. I said, I meant go away so my friends can yell at me in private. But but the woman didn't seem to understand. She didn't move. Wait over there, I said, pointing towards the trees nearest to the road. Let us talk, then we'll tell you. She didn't want to do it. She hesitated, then stood up, pulled her even more reluctant daughter up, and trudged off to the trees I had indicated. Oh God, Zara muttered. We're going to take them, aren't we? That's what we have to decide, I said. What? We feed her and then we all get to tell her to go away and finish starving? Zara, Zara made a noise of disgust. If she isn't a thief, Bankole said, and if she doesn't have any other dangerous habits, we may be able to carry them. That little kid. Yes, I said. Bankole, is there room for them at your place? His place? Three others asked. I hadn't had a chance to tell them about it, and I hadn't had the nerve. He has a lot of land up north and over by the coast, I said. There's a family house that there's a family house that we can't live in because his sister and her family are there, but there's room and trees and water. He says, I swallowed, looked at Bankole, who was smiling a little. He says we can start Earthseed there, build what we can. Are there jobs? Harry asked Bankole. My brother-in-law manages with year-round gardens and temporary jobs. He's raising 3 kids that way. But the jobs do pay money? Yes, they pay. Not well, but they pay. We'd better hold off talking about this for a while. We're torturing the young woman over there. She's still, Natividad said. She says she won't, but she will. You can look at her. She will steal. Natividad says. She says she won't, but she will. You can look at her and tell. She's been beaten, Jill said. The way they rolled up, when we first spotted them, they're used to being beaten, kicked, knocked around. Yeah, Allie looks haunted. You try to keep from getting hit in the head. You try to protect your eyes, your front. She thought we would beat her, she and the kid both. Interesting that Allie and Jill should understand so well. What a terrible father they had, and what had happened to their mother. They had never talked about her. It was amazing that they had escaped alive and sane enough to function. Should we let her stay? I asked them. Both girls nodded. I think she'll be a pain in the ass for a while, though, Allie said. Like Natividad says, she'll steal. She won't be able to stop herself. We'll have to watch her real good. That little kid will steal too. Steal and run like hell. Zara grinned. Reminds me of me at that age. They'll both be pains in the ass. I vote that we try them. If they have manners, or if they can learn manners, we keep them. If they're too stupid to learn, we throw them out. I looked at Travis and Harry standing together. What do you guys say? I say we're going soft, Harry said. You would have raised hell if we had tried to take in a beggar woman and her child a few weeks ago. I nodded. You're right. I would have. And maybe that's the attitude we should keep. But these two, I think they might be worth something, and I don't think they're dangerous. If I'm wrong, we can always dump them. They might not take to being dumped, Travis said. Then he shrugged. I don't want to be the one to send the little kid out to be one more thief, beggar, whore. But think, Lauren, if we let them stay and it doesn't work out, it might be damned hard to get rid of them. And if they turn out to have friends around here, friends that they're scouting for, we might have to kill them. Both Harry and Natividad began to protest. Kill a woman and a child? No, not possible. Never. The rest of us let them talk. When they ran down, I said, it could get that bad, I suppose, but I don't think it will. That woman wants to live. Even more, she wants her kid to live. I think she'd put up with a lot for the kid's sake, and I don't think she'd put the kid in danger by scouting for a gang. Gangs are more direct out here anyway. They don't need scouts. Silence. Shall we try them? I asked, or shall we turn them away now? I'm not against them, Travis said. Let them stay, for the kids' sake. But let's go back to having 2 watchers at once during the night. How the hell did those 2 get in here like that anyway? Jill shrank a little. They could have gotten in any time last night, she said. Any time. What we don't see can kill us, I said. Jill, you didn't see them. They could have been there when I took over the watch. You still didn't see them. They could have cut your throat or your sister's. Well, they didn't. The next one might. I leaned toward her. The world is full of crazy, dangerous people. We see signs of that every day. We don't watch out for ourselves. If we don't watch out for ourselves, they'll rob us, kill us, and maybe eat us. It's a world gone to hell, Jill, and we've only got each other to keep it off of us. Sullen silence. I reached out and took her hand. Jill, it wasn't my fault, she said. Jill, it wasn't my fault, she said. You can't prove Jill. She shut up and stared at me. Listen, no one is going to beat you up, for heaven's sake. But you did something wrong, something dangerous. You know you did. So what? So what do you want her to do? Allie demanded. Get on her knees and say she's sorry? I want her to love her own life and yours enough to not be careless. That's all I want. That's what you should want, no more than ever. Now more than ever. Jill closed her eyes. Oh shit, she said. And then, all right. I didn't see them. I really didn't. I'll watch better. No one else will get by me. I clasped her hand for a moment longer, then I let it go. Okay, let's get out of here. Let's collect the scared woman and her scared little kid and get out of here. The 2 scared people turned out to be the most racially mixed that I'd ever met. Here's their story, put together from fragments they told us during the day and tonight. The woman had a Japanese father and a black mother and a Mexican husband, all dead. Only she and her daughter are left. Her name is Emery Tanaka Solis. Her daughter is Tori Solis. Tori is 9 years old, not 7 as I had guessed. I suspect that she has rarely had enough to eat in her life. She's tiny, quick, quiet, and hungry-eyed. She hid bits of food in her filthy rags until we had made her a new dress from one of Bancole's shirts. Then she hid food in that. Although Tori is 9, her mother is only 23. At 13, Emery married a much older man who promised to take care of her. Her father was already dead, killed in someone else's gunfight. Her mother was sick and dying of tuberculosis. The mother pushed Emery into marriage to save her from victimization and starvation in the streets. Up to that point, the situation was dreary but normal. Emery had 3 children over the next 3 years, a daughter and 2 sons. She and her husband did farm work in trade for food, shelter, and hand-me-downs. Food, shelter, and hand-me-downs. Then the farm was sold to a big agribusiness conglomerate, and the workers fell into new hands. Wages were paid, but in company script, not in cash. Rent was charged for the workers' shacks. Workers had to pay for food, for clothing, new or used, for everything they needed. And of course, they could only spend their company notes at the company store. Wages, surprise, were never quite enough. Wages, surprise, were never quite enough to pay the bills. According to the new laws that might or might not exist, people were not permitted to leave an employer to whom they owed money. God damn. To who they owed money. Let's see. They were obligated to work off their debt either as quasi-indentured people or as convicts. That is, if they refused to work, they could be arrested, jailed, and in the end, handed over to their employers. Either way, such debt slaves could be forced to work longer hours for less pay, could be disciplined if they failed to meet their quotas, could be traded and sold with or without their consent, with or without their families, to distant employers who had temporary or permanent need of them. Worse, children could be forced to work off the debt of their parents if the parents died or became disabled or escaped. Emery's husband sickened and died. There was no doctor, no medicine beyond a few expensive over-the-counter preparations and the herbs that the workers grew in their tiny gardens. Jorge Francisco Solis died in a fever and pain on the earthen floor of his shack without ever being seen by a doctor. Bancole said it sounded as though he died of peritonitis brought on by untreated appendicitis. Such a simple thing, but then there's nothing more replaceable than unskilled labor. Emery and her children became responsible for the Solis debt taken away. Her sons were taken away. They were 1 and 2 years younger than her daughter and too young to be without both their parents. Yet they were taken. Emery was not asked to part with them, nor was she told what would be done with them. She had terrible suspicions when she recovered from the drug she had been given to quiet her down. She cried and demanded the return of her sons and would not work again until her masters threatened to take her. She decided then to run away, to take her daughter and the brave roads with their thieves, rapists, and cannibals. They had nothing for anyone to steal, and rape wasn't something they could escape by remaining slaves. As for the cannibals, well, perhaps they were only fantasies, lies intended to frighten slaves into accepting their lot. There are cannibals, I told her as we ate that night. We've seen them. I think, though, they were scavengers, not killers. They take advantage of road kills, that kind of thing. Scavengers kill, Emery said. If you get hurt or if you look sick, they come after you. I nodded, and she went on with her story. Late one night, she and Tori slipped out past the armed guards and electrified fences. The sound and motion detectors and the dogs both knew how to be quiet, how to fade from cover to cover, how to lie still for hours, but they were very fast. Slaves learn things like that. The ones who lived did. Emery and Tori must have been very lucky. Emery had some notion of finding her sons and getting them back, but she had no idea where they had been taken. They had been driven away in a truck. She knew that much. She didn't know even which way the truck turned when it reached the highway. Her parents had taught her to read and write, but she had seen no writing about her sons. She had to admit after a while that all she could do was save her daughter. Living on wild plants and whatever they could find or beg, they drifted north. That was the way Emery said it. They found things. If I were in her place, I would have found things too. A gang fight drove her to us. Gangs are always a special danger in cities. If you keep to the road while you're in individual gang territories, you might escape their attentions. We have so far. But the overgrown park land where we camped last night was, according to Emery, in dispute. 2 gangs shot at each other and called insults and accusations back and forth. Now and then they stopped to shoot at passing trucks. During one of these intervals, Emery and Tori had camped close to the roadside. Emery and Tori, who had camped close to the roadside, had slipped away. One group was coming closer to us, Emery said. They would shoot and run. When they ran, they got closer. We had to get away. We couldn't let them hear us or see us. We found your clearing, but we didn't see you. You know how to hide. That, I suppose, was a compliment. We tried to disappear into scenery when that's possible. Most of the time it isn't. Tonight it isn't. And tonight we watch 2 at a time. Sunday, September 12th, 2027. Okay, 2027. Was it 25? Damn, that's ambitious. Did I do that? I guess I did. Shit. Anyway, Tori has found us 2 more companions today, Grayson Mora and his daughter Doe. Doe was only a year younger than Tori, and the 2 little girls walking along, going the same way, became friends. Today, we turned west on State Highway 20 and we're heading back towards US 101. We spent a lot of time talking about settling on Bencole's land, about jobs and crops and what we might be able to build there. Meanwhile, the 2 little girls, Tori and Doe, were making friends and pulling their parents together. The parents were alike enough to attract my attention. They were about the same age, which meant that the man had become a father almost as young as the woman had become a mother. That wasn't unusual, but it was unusual that he had taken charge of his child. He was a tall, thin, Black Latino, quiet, protective of his child, yet tentative somehow. He liked Emery. I could see that. Yet on some level, he wanted to get away from her, away from us. When we left the road to make camp, he would have gone on if his daughter had not begged, then cried to stay with us. He had his own food, so I told him he could camp near us if he wanted to. 2 things hit me as I talked to him. First, he didn't like us. That was obvious. He didn't like us at all. I thought he might resent us because we were united and armed. You tend to resent people you are afraid of. I told him we kept a watch and that if he could put up with that, he was welcome. He shrugged and said in a soft voice, cold voice, "Oh yeah, he'll stay. His kid wants it and some part of him wants it, but something's wrong. Something beyond ordinary traveler caution." The second thing is my only suspicion. I believe Grayson and Doe Mora were also slaves, yet Grayson is now a rich pauper. He has a pair of sleep sacks, food, water, and money. If I'm right, he took them off someone or off someone's corpse. Why do I think that he was a slave? That odd tentativeness of his is just too much like Emery's. And Doe and Tori, though they don't look alike at all, seem to understand each other like sisters. Little kids can do that sometimes without it meaning anything. Just being little kids together is enough. But I've never seen any kids, but those 2 both show the same tendency to drop to the ground and roll into the fetal knot when frightened. Doe did just that when she tripped and fell, and Zara stepped over to see whether she was hurt. Doe's body snapped into a trembling ball. Was that, as Jill and Allie supposed, what people did when they expected to be beaten or kicked? A posture of protection and submission both at once? Something wrong about that fellow, Bencole said, glancing at Grayson as we bedded down next to each other. We had eaten and heard more of Emery's story and talked a little, but we were tired. I had my writing to do, and Travis and Jill were on watch. Bencole, who had an early morning watch with Zara, just wanted to talk. He sat beside me and spoke into my ear in a voice so low that if I leaned away from him, I lost words. "Mora's too jumpy," he said. "He flinches if someone walks close to him." "I think he's another ex-slave," I said in a voice just as low. "That might not be his only problem, but it's his most obvious one." "So you picked up on that too." He put his arm around me and sighed. "I agree. Both he and the child. And he didn't love us. And he doesn't love us. He doesn't trust us. Why should he? We'll have to watch all 4 of them for a while. They're odd. They might be stupid enough to try to grab some of our packs and leave some night, or might just be a matter of little things starting to disappear. The children are more likely to get caught at it. Yet, if the adults stay, it will be for the children's sake. If we take it easy on the children and protect them, I think the adults will be loyal to us. So we become the crew of a modern underground railroad, I said. Slavery again, even worse than my father thought, or at least sooner. He thought it would take a while. None of this is new. Bankole made himself comfortable against me. In the early 1990s, while I was in college, I heard about cases of growers doing some of this, holding people against their wills and forcing them to work without pay. Latinos in California, Blacks and Latins in the South. Now and then someone would go to jail for it. But Emory says there's a new law that's forcing people or their children to work off debt that they can't help running up as legal. Maybe. It's hard to know what to believe. I suppose the politicians may have passed a law that could be used to support debt slavery. I've heard of nothing about it. Anyone dirty enough to be a slaver is dirty enough to tell a pack of lies. You realize that woman's children were sold like cattle and no doubt sold into prostitution. I nodded. She knows too. Yes, my God. Things are breaking down more and more. I paused. I'll tell you though, if we can convince ex-slaves that they can have freedom with us, no one will fight harder to keep it. We need better guns though, and we need to be careful. It keeps getting more dangerous out here. It will be especially dangerous with those little girls around. Those two know how to be quiet, Bankole said. They're little rabbits, fast and silent. That's why they're still alive. For those of you who have tuned in late, just quickly, I'm continuing the read of the parable of the sower. You can go to my YouTube channel to watch what I've read so far. My YouTube channel is at Daughter of the Fates, @ Daughter of the Fates in the search engine on YouTube. Chapter 24. We're almost done, you guys. If I didn't have to go to work, I'd probably do something ambitious and go ahead and try to finish it today, but we're almost done. Like chapter 24 and chapter 25. That's it. We're done. Chapter 24. Respect God. Pray working. Pray learning. Planning. Doing. Pray creating. Teaching. Reaching. Pray working. Pray to focus your thoughts. Still your fears. Strengthen your purpose. Respect God. Shape God. Pray working. Friday, September 17th, 2027. We read some verses and talked about Earthseed for a while this morning. It was a calming thing to do, almost like church. We needed something calming and reassuring. Even the new people joined in, asking questions, thinking aloud, applying the verses to their experiences. God is change, and in the end, God does prevail. But we have something to say about when and why. About the whens and the whys of that end. Yeah, it's been a horrible week. We've taken both today and yesterday as rest days. We might take tomorrow as well. I need it whether the others do or not. We're all sore and sick, in mourning and exhausted, yet triumphant. Odd to be triumphant. I think it's because most of us are still alive. We are a harvest of survivors, but then that's what we've always been. This is what happened. At our noon stop on Tuesday, Tori and Doe, the two little girls, went away from the group to urinate. Emery went with them. She had kind of taken charge of Doe as well as her own daughter. The night before, she and Grayson Moore slipped away from the group and stayed away for over an hour. Harry and I were on watch, and we saw them go. Now they were a couple, all over each other, but at arm's length from everyone else. Strange people. So Emery took the girls off to pee, not far away, just across the hill face, and out of sight behind a patch of dead bushes and tall, dry grass. The rest of us sat eating, drinking, and sweating in the shade we could get from a corpse of oak trees that looked only half dead. These trees had been robbed of a great number of branches, no doubt by people needing firewood. I was looking at their many jagged wounds when the screaming began. First, there were the high, needle-thin, needle-sharp shrieks of the little girls. Then we heard Emery shouting for help. Then we heard a man's voice cursing. Most of us jumped up without thinking and ran toward the noise. In mid-stride, I grabbed Harry and Zara by the arms to get their attention. Then I gestured them back to guard our packs and Natividad and Allie, who had stayed with the babies. Harry had the rifle and Zara had one of the Berettas, and in that moment, they both resented the hell out of me. No matter. For the moment, I was just glad to see them go back. They could cover us if necessary and keep us from being overwhelmed. We found Emery fighting with a big bald man who had grabbed Tori. Doe was already running back to us screaming. She ran straight into her father's arms. He swept her up and ran off toward the highway. Then he veered back toward the Oaks and our people. There were other bald people coming up from the highway. Like us, they ran toward the scream. I saw metal gleaming among them, perhaps only knives, perhaps guns. Travis spotted the group too and yelled a warning before I could. I fell back, dropped to one knee, aimed my .45 two-handed, and waited for a clear shot at Emery's attacker. The man was much taller than Emery, and his head and shoulders were exposed except where he held Tori against him. The little girl looked like a doll that he was clutching in one arm. Emery was the problem. She, small and quick, was darting at the man, tearing at his face, trying to reach his eyes. He was trying to protect his eyes and to knock or throw her away from him. With both hands free, he might have been quick enough to bat her aside, but he wouldn't let go of the struggling Tori, and Emery wouldn't be beaten off. For an instant, he did knock Tori back from him. In that brief window of time, my own ears ringing from his blow, I shot him. I knew at once that I had hit him. He didn't fall, but I felt his pain, and I wasn't good for anything else for a while. Then he toppled, and I collapsed with him. But I could still see and hear, and I still had the gun. I heard shouting. The bald gang from the highway was almost on us. 6, 7, 8 people. I couldn't do anything while I was dealing with the pain, but I saw them. Instants later, when the man I had shot lost consciousness or died, I was free and needed. Bankole had our only other gun away from camp. I got up before I should have, almost fell down again, then shot a second attacker off Travis, who was carrying Emery. I went down again, but didn't lose consciousness. I saw Bankole grab Tori and all but throw her to Jill. Jill caught her, turned, and ran back toward camp with her. Bankole reached me, and I was able to get up and help him cover our retreat. We had only the scarred trees to retreat to, but they had thick, solid-looking trunks. An attacker fired several bullets into them as we reached them. It took me several seconds to understand that someone was shooting at us. Once I did, I dropped behind the trees with the others and looked for the opposing gun. Our rifle thundered behind me before I could spot anything. Harry, on the job. He fired twice more. I fired twice more, barely aiming, barely in control. I believe Bankole fired. Then I was lost. No more good for anything. I died with someone. The shooting stopped. I died with someone else. Someone else laid hands on me, and I came within a finger's twitch of squeezing the trigger once more. Bankole, you stupid asshole, I whispered. I almost killed you. You're bleeding, he said. I was surprised. I tried to remember whether I'd been shot. Maybe I'd just come down on a sharp piece of wood. I had no sense of my own body. I hurt, but I couldn't have said where, or even whether the pain was mine or someone else's. The pain was intense, yet diffused somehow. I felt disembodied. Is everyone else all right? I asked. Be still, he said. Is it over, Bankole? Yes, the survivors have run away. Take my gun then and give it to Natividad in case they decide to come back. I think I felt him take the gun from my hand. I heard muffled talk that I didn't quite understand. That was when I realized I was losing consciousness. All right then. At least I had held on long enough to do some good. Oh, damn, man. Jill Gilchrist is dead. She was shot in the back as she ran toward the trees carrying Tori. Bankole didn't tell me, didn't want me to know before I had to because as it turned out, I was wounded myself. I was lucky. My wound was minor. It hurt, but other than that, it didn't matter much. Jill was unlucky. I found out about her death when I came to and heard Allie's hoarse screaming grief. Jill had gotten Tori back to the trees, put her down, then, without a sound, folded to the ground as though taking cover. Emery had grabbed Tori and huddled, crying with her in terror and relief. Everyone else had been busy, first taking cover, then firing or directing fire. Travis was the first to see the blood pooling around Jill. He shouted from Bankole, then turned Jill onto her back and saw blood welling from what turned out to be an exit wound in her chest. Bankole says she died before he reached her. No last words, no last sight of her sister, not even the assurance that she had saved the little girl. She had. Tori was bruised, but fine. Everyone was fine except Jill. My own wound, to be honest, was a big scratch. A bullet had plowed a furrow straight through the flesh of my left side, leaving little damage. A lot of blood, a couple of holes in my shirt, and a lot of pain. The wound throbbed worse than a burn, but it wasn't disabling. Cowboy wound, Harry said when he and Zara came back to look over me. They looked dirty and miserable, but Harry tried to be upbeat for me. They had just helped to bury Jill. The group had, with hands, sticks, and our hatchet, dug a shallow grave for her while I was unconscious. They put her among the tree's roots, covered her, and rolled big rocks atop her grave. The trees were to have her, but the dogs and the cannibals were not. The group had decided to bed down for the night where we were, even though our oak corpse should have been rejected as an overnight camp because it was too close to the highway. You're a goddamn fool and too big to carry, Zara told me. So just rest there and let Bankole take care of you. Not that anyone could stop him. You've just got a cowboy wound, Harry repeated. In that book I bought, people are always getting shot in the side or the arm or the shoulder, and it's nothing. Although Bankole says a good percentage of them would have died of tetanus or some other infection. Thanks for the encouragement, I said. Zara gave him a look, then patted my arm. Don't worry, she said. No germ will get past that old man. He's mad as hell at you for getting yourself shot. Says if you had any sense, you would have stayed back here with the babies. What? Hey, he's old, Harry said. What do you expect? I sighed. How's Allie? Crying. He shook his head. She won't let anyone near her except Justin. Even he keeps trying to comfort her. It upsets him that she's crying. Emery and Tori are kind of beaten up too, Zara said. They're the other reason we're not moving. She paused. Hey, Lauren, you ever notice anything funny about those two, Emery and Tori? I mean, and about that guy Mora too? Something clicked into place for me, and I sighed again. They're sharers, aren't they? Yes, all of them. Both adults and both kids. You knew? Not until now. I did notice something odd. Their tentativeness and touchiness, not wanting to be touched, I mean. And they were all slaves. My brother Marcus once said, what good slaves sharers would make. That Mora guy wants to leave, Harry said. So let him go, I answered. He tried to run out on us just before the shooting. He came back, even helped dig Jill's grave. I mean, he wants us all. He wants us all to leave. He says that gang we beat will come back. Uh, that gang that we beat will come back when it's dark. He's sure? Yeah. He's going crazy, wanting to get his kid out of here. Can Emery and Tori make it? I'll carry Tori, a new voice said. Emery can make it. Grayson Mora, of course, last seen abandoning ship. I got up slowly. My side hurt. Bancole had cleaned and bandaged the wound while I was unconscious, and that was a piece of luck. Now, though, I felt half conscious, half detached from my body. I felt everything except pain, as though a thick layer of cotton. Only the pain was sharp and real. I was almost grateful for it. I can walk, I said after trying a few steps, but I feel like I'm walking on stilts. I don't know if I can keep up the usual pace. Grayson Moore stepped close to me. He glanced at Harry as though he wished Harry would go away. Harry just stared back at him. How many times did you die? Moore asked me. 3 at last, I answered, as though this were a sane conversation. Maybe 4. I never did it like that before, over and over. Insane. But you look well enough. His expression hardened as though I'd slapped him. Of course, I had insulted him. I'd said, where you were, man and fellow sharer, while your woman and your group were in danger. Funny, there I was speaking a language I hadn't realized I knew. I had to get Doe out of danger, he said. I had no gun anyway. Can you shoot? He hesitated. Never shot before, he admitted, dropping his voice to a low mumble. Again, I had shamed him, this time without meaning to. When we teach you to shoot, you will. She said, when we teach you to shoot, will you? To protect the group. Yeah, though at that moment, I think he would have preferred to shoot me. It hurts like hell, I warned. He shrugged. Most things do. I looked into his thin, angry face. Were all slaves so thin, underfed, overworked, and taught that most things hurt? Are you from this area? Born in Sacramento. Then we need all the information you can give us. Without a gun, we need you to help. We need you to help us survive here. My information is to get out of here before those things up the hill throw paint on themselves and start shooting people and setting fires. Oh shit, I said. So that's what they are. What'd you think they were? I didn't have a chance to think about them. It wouldn't have mattered anyway. Harry, did you guys strip the dead? Yes. He gave me a thin smile. We got another gun, a 38. I put some stuff in your pack from the ones you killed. Thank you. I don't know that I can carry my pack yet. Maybe Bancole. He's already got it in his cart. Let's go. We headed out toward the road. Is that how to do it? Grayson Moore asked, walking next to me. Whoever kills takes. Yes, but we don't kill unless someone threatens us, I said. We don't hunt people. We don't eat human flesh. We fight together against enemies. If one of us is in need, the rest help out. And we don't steal from one another. Ever. Emery said that. I didn't believe her at first. Will you live as we do? Yeah, I guess so. I hesitated. So what else is wrong? I can see that you don't trust us, even now. He walked closer to me, but did not touch me. Where'd that white man come from? He demanded. I've known him my whole life. I've known him all my life, I said. He and I and the others have kept one another alive for a long time now. But him and those others, they don't feel anything. You're the only one who feels. We call it sharing, and I'm the only one. But we help each other. A group is strong. 1 or 2 people are easier to rob and kill. Yeah. He looked around at the others. There was no great trust or liking in his expression, but he looked more relaxed, more satisfied. He looked as though he had solved a troubling puzzle. Testing him, I let myself stumble. It was easy. I still had little feeling in my feet and legs. Moore stepped aside. He didn't touch me or offer help. Sweet guy. I left Maura, went over to Allie, and walked with her for a while. Her grief and resentment were like a wall against me, against everyone. But a wall against everyone, I suppose. But I was the one bothering her at the moment. And I was alive and her sister was dead. And her sister was the only family she had left. And why didn't I just get the hell out of and why the hell didn't I just get out of her face? She never said anything. She just pretended I wasn't there. She pushed Justin along in his carriage and wiped tears from her stony face now. And then, with a swift whip-like motion, let's see, wiped the tears from her stony face now and then with a swift whip-like motion. She was hurting. She was hurting herself. She was hurting herself doing that. She was rubbing her face too hard, too fast, rubbing it raw. She was hurting me too, and I didn't need any more pain. I stayed with her, though, until her defenses began to crumble under a new wave of crippling grief. She stopped hurting herself and just let the tears run down her face, let them fall to her chest and to her broken and onto the broken blacktop. She seemed to sag under a sudden weight. I hugged her then. I put my hands on her shoulders and stopped her, half blind, plodding. When she swung around to face me, hostile and hurting, I hugged her. She could have broken free. I was feeling far from strong just then, but after a first angry pulling away, she hung on to me and moaned. I've never heard anyone moan like that. She cried and moaned there at the roadside, and others stopped and waited for us. No one spoke. Justin began to whimper, and Natividad came back to comfort him. The wordless message was the same for both child and woman. In spite of your loss and pain, you aren't alone. You still have people who care about you and want you to be all right. You still have family. And after a while, Allie and I let each other go. She isn't a chatty woman, especially not in her pain. She took Justin from Natividad, smoothed his hair, and held him. When we began walking again, she carried him for a while. I pushed the carriage. We walked together, and there didn't seem to be any need to say anything. On the road, there was a fair amount of foot traffic in both directions. Still, I worried that a big group like ours would be noticeable and locatable no matter what. I worried because I didn't understand the ways of our attackers. Sometime later, when Allie put Justin back into the carriage and took the carriage from me, I moved to walk with Bankole and Emery. Emery was the one who explained things to me, and she was the one who spotted the smoke from the first fire, no doubt because she was looking for it. We couldn't tell for sure, but the fire looked as though it might have begun back as far as where we had stopped at the Oak Corpse. They'll burn everything, Emery whispered to Bankole and me. They won't stop until they've used up all the row they have. All night they'll be burning things and people. Row, pyromania, that damn fire drug again. Will they follow us? I asked. She shrugged. There are a lot of us, and you killed some of them. I think they'll take their revenge on other weaker travelers. Another shrug. To them, we're all the same. A traveler is a traveler. So unless we get caught in one of their fires, we'll be okay. Yeah. So let's see. So unless we get caught in one of their fires, we'll be okay. Yeah. They hate everybody who isn't them. They would have sold my Tory to get some more row. I looked at her bruised, swollen face. Bankole had given her something for pain. I was grateful for that, and half angry at him for refusing to give me anything. He didn't understand my numbness and grogginess back at the corpse, and it disturbed him. Well, at least that had faded away. Let him die 3 or 4 times and see how he feels. No, I'm glad he'll never know how it feels. It makes no sense. That brief, endless agony over and over. It makes no sense at all. I keep catching myself wondering how it is that I'm still alive. Emery, I said, keeping my voice low. She looked at me. You know I'm a sharer. She nodded, then glanced sidelong at Bankole. He knows, I assured her. But look, you and Grayson are the first sharers I've known who have had children. There was no reason to tell her. There was no reason to tell her and Grayson and their children. There was no reason to tell her she and Grayson and their children were the first sharers she had known, period. I hope to have kids myself someday, so I need to know, do they always inherit the sharing? One of my boys didn't have it, she said. Some feelers, some sharers can't have any kids. I don't know why. And I knew some who had 2 or 3 kids who didn't have it at all. Bosses though, they like you to have it. Bosses though, they like you to have it. I'll bet they do. Sometimes, she continued, sometimes they pay more for people who have it, especially kids, her kids. Yet they had taken a boy who wasn't a sharer and left a girl who was. How long would it have been before they came back for the girl? Perhaps they had a lucrative offer for the boys as a pair, so they sold them first. My God, Bankole said, this country has slipped back 200 years. Things were better when I was little, Emery said. My mother always said they would get better again. Good times would come back. She said they always did. My father would shake his head and not say anything. She looked around to see where Tori was and spotted her on Grayson Moore's shoulders. Then she caught sight of something else and she gasped. We followed her gaze and saw a fire creeping over the hills behind us, far behind us, but not far enough. This was some new fire whipping along in the dry evening breeze. Either the people who had attacked us had followed us, setting fires, or someone was imitating them, echoing them. We went on, moving faster, trying to see where we could go to be safe. On either side of the highway, there was dry grass, there were trees, living and dead. So far, the fires were only on the north side. We kept to the south side, hoping it would be safe. There was a lake ahead, according to a map of my map of the area. According to my map of the area, Clear Lake, it was called. The map showed it to be large, and the highway followed its northern shore for a few miles. We would reach it soon. How soon? I calculated as we walked. Tomorrow. We should be able to camp near it tomorrow evening. Not soon enough. I could smell the smoke now. Did that mean the wind was blowing the fire toward us? Other people began hurrying and keeping to the south side of the road and heading west. No one went east now. There were no trucks yet, but it was getting late. They would be barreling through soon, and we should be camping for the night soon. Did we dare? The south side still seemed free of fire behind us, but on the north side, the fire crawled after us, coming no closer, but refusing to be left behind. We went on for a while, all of us looking back often, all of us tired, some of us hurting. I called a halt and gestured us off the road to the south at a place where there was room to sit and rest. We can't stay here, Moore said. The fire could jump the road any time. We can rest for a few moments, I said. We can see the fire, and it will tell us when we'd better start walking again. We better start now, Moore said. If that fire gets going good, it will move faster than we can run. Best to keep well ahead of it. Best to have the strength to keep ahead of it, I said, and I took a water bottle from my pack and drank. We were within sight of the road, and we had made it a rule not to eat or drink in such exposed places, but today that rule had to be suspended. To go into the hills away from the road might mean being cut off from the road by fire. We couldn't know when or where a windblown piece of burning debris might land. Damn. Okay. Others followed my example and drank and ate a little dried fruit, meat, and bread. Bankole and I shared with Emery and Tori. Moore seemed to want to leave in spite of us, but his daughter Doe was sitting half asleep on the ground against Zara. He stooped next to her and made her drink a little water and eat some fruit. We might have to keep moving all night, Allie said, her voice almost too soft to hear. This might be the only rest we get. And to Travis, you'd better put Dominic into the carriage with Justin when he's finished eating. Travis nodded. He'd carried Dominic this far. Now he tucked him in with Justin. I'll push the carriage for a while, he said. Bankole looked at my wound, rebandaged it, and this time gave me something for the pain. He buried my bloody rags he had removed, digging a shallow hole with a flat rock. Emery, with Tori gone to sleep against her, looked to see what Bankole was doing with me, then jumped and looked away, her hand going to her own side. I didn't know you were hurt so much, she whispered. I'm not, I said. I made myself smile. It looks nastier than it actually is with all the blood, but it isn't that bad. I'm damn lucky compared to Jill, and it doesn't stop me from walking. You didn't give me any pain. When you were walking, she said. I nodded, glad to know I could fake her out. It's ugly, I said. It's ugly, but not painful. She settled down as though she felt better. No doubt she did. If I had moaned and groaned, I'd have all four of them moaning and groaning. The kids might even bleed along with me. I would have to be careful and keep lying at least as long as the fire was a threat, or as long as I could. The truth was, those blood-saturated bandages scared the hell out of me, and the wound hurt worse than ever. But I knew I had to keep going or burn. After a few moments, Bankole's pills began to take the edge off my pain, and that made the whole world easier to endure. We had about an hour's rest before the fires made us too nervous to stay where we were. Then we got up and walked. By then, at some point behind us, the fire had already jumped the road. Now, neither the north nor the south side looked safe. Until it was dark, all we would see in the hills behind us was smoke. It was a terrifying, looming, moving wall. Later, after dark, we could see the fire eating its way towards us. There were dogs running along the road with us, but they paid no attention to us. Cats and deer ran past us, and a skunk scuttled by. It was live and let live. Neither humans nor animals were foolish enough to waste time attacking one another. Behind us and to the north, the fire began to roar. We put Tori in the carriage and Justin and Dominic between her legs. The babies never even woke up while we were moving them. Tori herself was more half asleep. I worried that the carriage might break down with all that weight, but it held. Travis, Harry, and Allie traded off pushing it. Doe, we put atop the load on Bankole's cart. She couldn't have been comfortable there, but she didn't complain. She was more awake than Tori, and she had been walking on her own most of the time since our encounter with the would-be kidnappers. She was a strong little kid, her father's daughter. Grace and Maura helped push Bankole's cart. In fact, once Doe was loaded aboard, Maura pushed the cart most of the time. The man wasn't likable, but his love for his daughter was admirable. At some point in the endless night, more smoke and ash than ever began to swirl around us, and I caught myself thinking that we might not make it. Without stopping, we wet shirts, scarves, whatever we had, and tied them around our noses and mouths. The fire roared and thundered its way past us on the north, singeing our hair and clothing, making breathing a terrible effort. The babies woke up and screamed in fear and pain, then choked and almost brought me down. Tori, crying herself with their pain and her own, held on to them and would not let them struggle out of the carriage. I thought we would die. I believed there was no way for us to survive this sea of fire, hot wind, smoke, and ash. I saw people, strangers, fall, and we left them lying on the highway, waiting to burn. I stopped looking back. In the roar of the fire, I could not hear whether they screamed. I could see the babies before Natividad threw wet rags over threw wet rags over them. I knew they were screaming. Then I couldn't see them, and it was a blessing. We began to run out of water. There was nothing to do except there was nothing to do except keep going or burn. The terrible deafening noise of the fire increased, then lessened, and again increased, then lessened. It seemed that the fire went north away from the road, then whipped back down toward us. It teased us like a living, malevolent thing, intent on causing pain and terror. It drove us before it like dogs chasing a rabbit. It didn't, yet it didn't eat us. It could have, but it didn't. In the end, the worst of it roared off to the northwest. Firestorm, Bankole called it later. Yes, like a tornado of fire roaring around, just missing us, playing with us, then letting us live. We could not yet rest. There was still fire, little fires that could grow into big ones, smoke, blinding and choking smoke. No rest. But we could slow down. We could emerge from the worst of it, smoke and ash, and escape the lash of the hot winds. We could pause by the side of the road for a moment, and gag in peace. There was a lot of gagging, coughing and gagging and crying muddy tracks onto our faces. It was incredible. We were going to survive. We were still alive and together, scorched and miserable, in great need of water, but alive. We were going to make it. Later, when we dared, we went off the road, unloaded my pack from Bankole's car, and dug out his extra water bottle. He dug it out. He had told us he had it when he could have kept it for himself. Oh, he had told us he had it when he could have kept it for himself. We'll reach Clear Lake sometime tomorrow, I said. Early tomorrow, I think. I don't know how far we've come or where we are now, so I can only guess that we'll get there early. But it is there waiting for us tomorrow. People grunted and coughed and downed swallows from Bankole's extra water bottle. The kids had to be prevented from guzzling too much water. As it was, Dominique choked and began to cry again. We camped where we were, within the sight of the road. 2 of us had to stay awake on watch. I volunteered for the first watch because I was in too much pain to sleep. I got my gun back from Natividad, checked to see that she had reloaded it. She had, and looked around for a partner. I'll watch with you, Grayson Morris said. That surprised me. I would have preferred someone who knew how to use a gun, someone I would trust with a gun. I'm not going to be able to sleep until you do, he said. It's that simple. So let's both put our pain to good use. I looked at Emery and the 2 girls to see whether they'd heard, but they'd seemed to be already asleep. All right, I said. We've got to watch for strangers and for fire. Give me a yell if you see anything unusual. Give me a gun, he said. If anybody comes close, I can at least use it to scare them. In the dark, sure. No gun, I said. Not yet. You don't know enough yet. He stared at me for several seconds. Then he went over to Bankole. He turned his back to me and spoke. He turned his back to me as he spoke to Bankole. Look, you know I need a gun to do anything in a place like this. She doesn't know how it is. She thinks she does, but she doesn't. Bankole shrugged. If you can't do it, man, go to sleep. One of us will take the watch with her. Shit. Moore made the word shit. Moore made the word long and nasty. Shit. First time I saw her, I knew she was a man. Just didn't know she was the only man here. Absolute silence. Doe Mora saved the situation to the degree that it could be saved. At that moment, she stepped up behind her father and tapped him on the back. He spun around, more than ready to fight, spun with such speed and fury that the little girl squealed and jumped back. What the hell are you doing up? He shouted. What do you want? Frightened, the little girl just stared at him. After a moment, she extended her hand, offering a pomegranate. Zara said we could have this, she whispered. Would you cut it? Good thinking, Zara. I didn't turn to look at her, but I was aware of her watching. By now, everyone still awake was watching. Everyone's tired and everyone's hurting, I told him. Everyone, not just you. But we've managed to keep ourselves alive by working together and not by doing or saying stupid things. And if that's not good enough for you, Bankole added in a voice low and ugly with anger, tomorrow you can go out and find yourself a different kind of group to travel with. A group too goddamn macho to waste its time saving your child's life twice in one day. There must be something worthwhile in Mora. He didn't say anything. He took out his knife and cut the pomegranate into quarters for dough, then kept half of it because she insisted that he was supposed to have half. They sat together and ate the juicy, seedy red fruit. Then Mora tucked dough in again and found himself a perch where, gunless, he began his first watch. He said nothing more about guns, and he never apologized. Of course, he didn't leave us. Where would he go? He was a runaway slave. We were the best thing he had found so far, the best thing he was going to find as long as he had dough with him. All right, so now I got to stop. I got to get ready for work. Okie dokie. So that is all. So let's see. We're only... Oh, shit. I'm going to keep on because we only a page and a half from chapter 25. And chapter 25 is the last chapter. That way I can read tomorrow and we'll be done with the book. Okay? So I'm going to give myself maybe 10 more minutes to read these last couple of pages. We didn't reach Clear Lake the next morning. To tell the truth, it was already the next morning when we went to sleep. We were too tired and sore to get up at dawn, which came early in the second watch. Only the need for water made us move out when we did, at a hot, smoky 11 a.m. We found the corpse of a young woman when we went back to the road. There wasn't a mark on her, but she was dead. I want her clothes, Emery whispered. She was near me, or I wouldn't have heard her. The dead woman was about her size and dressed in a cotton shirt and pants that looked almost new. They were dirty, but far less so than Emery's clothes. Strip her then, I said. I'd help you, but I'm not bending too well this morning. I'll give her a hand, Allie whispered. Justin was asleep in his carriage with Dominique, so she was free to help with the ordinary, unspeakable things that we did now to live. The dead woman had not even soiled herself in her dying. That made the job less disgusting than it could have been. Rigor mortis had set in, however, and the stripping her was a job for two. There was no one but us on this stretch of road, so Emery and Allie had all the time they needed. We had seen no other walkers yet this morning. Emery and Allie took every scrap of clothing, including underwear, socks, and boots, though Emery thought the boots would be too big for her. No matter, if no one could wear them, she could sell them. In fact, it was the boots that yielded Emery the first cash she had ever owned. On the farm where she had been a slave, she had been paid only in company scrip, worthless except on the farm and almost worthless there. Stitched into the tongue of each of the dead woman's boots were 5 folded $100 bills, $1,000 in all. We had to tell her how little that was. If she were careful and shopped only at the cheapest stores and ate no meat, wheat, or dairy products, it might feed her for 2 weeks. God damn. It might feed her for 2 weeks. It might feed both her and Tori for a week and a half, Still, it seemed riches to Emery. Late that day, when we reached Clear Lake, much smaller than I had expected, we came across a tiny, expensive store being run from the back of an old truck near a cluster of half-burned, collapsed cabins. It sold fruit, vegetables, nuts, and smoked fish. We all had to buy a few things, but Emery squandered too much money on pears and walnuts for everyone. She delighted in passing these around and being able to give us something for a change. She's all right. We'll have to teach her about shopping and the value of money, but she's worth something. Emery is, and she's decided she's one of us. Sunday, September 26, 2007. Somehow we've reached our home, Bancole's land in the coastal hills of Humboldt County. The highway, US 101, is to the east and north of us, and Cape Mendocino and the sea are to the west. A few miles south are state parks filled with huge redwood trees and hordes of squatters. The land surrounding us, however, is as empty and as wild as any I've ever seen. It's covered with dry brush, tree stumps, all far removed from any city, and a long, hilly walk from the little towns that line the highway. There's farming around here and logging and just plain isolated living. According to Bancole, it's best to mind your own business and pay and not pay too much attention to how people on neighboring plots of land earn a living. If they hijack trucks on 101, if they grow marijuana, distill whiskey, or brew up more complicated illegal substances, it's live and let live. Bancole guided us along a narrow black-topped road that soon became a narrow dirt road. We saw a few cultivated fields, some scars left by past fires or logging, and a lot of land that seemed unused. The road all but vanished before we came to the end of it. Good for isolation, bad for getting things in and out, bad for traveling back and forth to get work. Bancole had said his brother-in-law had spent a lot of time in various towns and away from his family. That was easier to understand now. There's no possibility here of coming home every day or two. So what did you have to do to save cash? Sleep in doorways or parks in town. Maybe it was worth the inconvenience to do just that if you could keep your family together and safe, far from the desperate, the crazy, and the vicious. Or that's what I thought until I reached the hillside where Bancole's sister's house and outbuildings were supposed to be. There was no house. There were no buildings. There was almost nothing. A broad black smear on the hillside, a few charred planks sticking up from the rubble. A broad black smear on the hillside, a few charred planks sticking up from the rubble, some leaning against others, and a tall brick chimney standing black and solitary like a tombstone in a picture of an old-style graveyard. A tombstone amid bones and ashes. Oh, man. Damn. All right, now I absolutely have to stop, but I will be back at 11 a.m. tomorrow where we will be finished with this book, with chapter 25 of the parable of the sower. What a terrible way to end. But we will continue reading the parable of the sower tomorrow until its completion. And then I am too excited because Friday, I'm going to keep reminding y'all because I want y'all to join me. Friday, I will be beginning a new book that should only take us a few days to read, honestly, maybe 3 or 4 days. It's a very short book, but it's a great book. It was gifted to me for my birthday this year. It is called The Great Black Mama of Creation. The Great Black Mama of Creation. So that's the book that we're going to start reading on Friday after we complete the book, The Parable of the Sower, on tomorrow. So until then, my name is Cassandra Floyd. I am also known as the Daughter of the Fates. I am the founder of the Temple of Evolutionary Emergence, and I will see you tomorrow again at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Take care and have a great day.